What better way than to read a couple of lines from the poem? Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget the weariness, the fever, and the fret. Have you ever tried to forget these? Have you succeeded? Let's see what our poet says. Melancholy has been with John Keats, our poet, and the poem today is Ode to a Nightingale. Why would a young man be so melancholic? What is it that inspires him, ignites his poetic talent to write this? One cannot but remember that he had sat with his brother, younger brother, who was suffering from tuberculosis. And then he dies. And then our poet realizes that he is suffering from the same disease. Isn't that enough to set one thinking about the painful reality of life? And as the poem goes on, you will see the desire to escape into the world of nature. After all, he had said, truth is beauty, beauty, truth. And where does he find us? In the world of nature. John Keats, 1795 to 1821, wrote this poem in 1819. Quick guess, how old was he? And the poem begins, my heart aches and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains. 1 minute passed, and leathwards had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being happy, too happy in thine happiness, that thou light-winged dryad of the trees in some melodious plot of beechen green, and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. On a very personal note, I do want to say that I was lucky to visit the same garden where Keats is supposed to have heard the nightingale sing. And as I stood there looking at the trees, I couldn't see a nightingale. I thought to myself, if poetry is not born here, where would it be born? So we have the beauty of nature, and then he talks about the contrast between nature and himself. So how can he forget? I'm sure, my dear friends, all of us have this feeling, this desire to escape. And maybe some of us drink, maybe some of us smoke, and maybe wrong, but maybe somebody has a whiff of something. Or we can fly on the wings of poesy, that is, in our imagination. What does he want to do? Oh, for a draught of vintage that had been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and Provencal song and sunburnt mirth. Oh, for a beaker full of the warm south, full of the true, the blushful hippocrene, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim. Look at that imagery, with beaded bubbles winking at the brim, and purple-stained mouth, that I might drink and leave the world unseen. And with thee, who is the thee? The nightingale, fade away into the forest dim. What do? Fade far away, dissolve and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever and the fret. Here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies. How can one not think of that young brother he lost? And what does he say? The weariness, the fever and the fret, right, of the young man. On the other side, the contrast with here where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad grey hairs, and contrast that with where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden eye despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. I could go on and on about Keats's life, how Fanny Brown, his girlfriend, decided to leave him. Can't blame her when she realized that this young man is going to die of tuberculosis, consumption, as we call that. We come back to the garden where he's listening to the nightingale, and Keats says, I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, nor what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in embalmed darkness guess each sweet, wherewith the seasonable month endows the grass, the thicket, and the fruit tree wild, white hawthorn, and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child, the coming musk rose full of dewy wine, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. Stop for a moment, and then he says, Darkling, I listen, and for many a time I have been half in love with easeful depth, called him soft names in many a mused rhyme, to take into the air my quiet breath. Now more than ever it seems rich to die, to seize upon the midnight with no pain, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy. Still wouldst thou sing, and I have years in vain, to thy high requiem become a sot, even after I'm dead and gone, from dust thou art to dust thou return. And permit me to read the last words, because I want to fly away with you, O nightingale. Where do I want to go? Away, away, for I will fly to thee, not charioted by Bacchus and his bards. I don't need any drink, I don't need any liquor. Then how will I? But on the viewless wings of poesy, though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee, tender is the night, and happily the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by all her starry face. But here there's no light, save what from heaven is with the breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. Are you also with the nightingale? Have you been able to fly away? Are you looking at the world around you and wondering how much you want to change? I think every day in this century there's some new problem. Maybe a world problem, maybe a domestic problem, maybe a social, societal problem. But all of us have this desire to run away, to flee. Of course, we know we have to come back. And that is why he also says that I can on the wingless of poesy, right? I can with my imagination. But I know I have to come back. What do we know of the poet as we read this poem? What would happen if I knew nothing of his life? I think I would think he's a very imaginative poet. What is there about this poem that makes me think, oh wow, what a poem. I think if I had to describe it in one word, it would be imagery. I just have to shut my eyes and I can see every word come true. Whether it is the nightingale flying away, or the flowers at my feet, or the embalmed night. Oh, I could go on. Isn't that what makes a poem a great poem? When did Keats live? When did he write? If one were to answer these academic questions, remember, this is the Romantic age. It came after the neoclassical age. So from objective poetry, we moved on to subjective poetry. So many of the poems begin with I and me. I wandered lonely as a cloud, if you remember. My heart aches, if you remember. I could go on. So the Romantic age brought with it a love for nature. It brought subjectivity. It said matter matters more than manner does, right? And therefore the poets didn't look at the figures of speech or the rhyme scheme or the structure. As it came from their heart, they poured it out into words. A poem written in 1819 and today in 2025. Does it still hold relevance? Does it still make sense? We have to ask each one of ourselves probably the question, or we can ask a question to Homo sapiens in general. Yes, it matters. It touches our heart, because who is not worried about mortality? Who is not worried about loneliness, about being left after your beloved ones have gone away? And that is what this poem basically is about. A romantic at heart he was, but he also lived in the age of romanticism. So if I look within myself, is there something that still appeals to me? And well, if it appeals to me, I'm sure it's true of many of my viewers, listeners, friends, students, peers, whoever you will. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, what does this poem mean to me? Is there a moral? Is there a message? Or is it just a pleasure reading a poem like Ode to a Nightingale by John Keats?